Hello and welcome into this edition of the Devil Source Postgame Show. I'm Sammy Miller alongside Chris Cartman, following ASU basketball's 62-59 win over Tarleton State. Chris, what were your initial takeaways from tonight?
It was ugly. Bobby Hurley said it after the game. Everybody in the arena who witnessed it knows that it was not a good performance. They did enough defensively in some key moments and overall played relatively well, I would say, on the defensive end. It was a brutally bad offensive showing. Way too many turnovers, 21 turnovers. Shot selection wasn't very good. They didn't make shots that they took. They didn't get the ball inside enough. In a lot of ways, these are some of the tendencies that we've seen from Hurley's teams recently and really even throughout his tenure. So the questions are going to be, are those things going to be continuing hallmarks of this particular team, even with a roster that's been half new?
And Chris, for the remainder of the game, Tarleton was really in the lead, and then ASU ended up fighting back, and it was a very close game. What factors led to it being such a tight battle in the end?
Well, ASU trailed, for the most part in the game, had that 12-0 run to close the gap, and from there it was very neck and neck. At one point it was down 5 with just a few minutes left. Was able to kind of overcome that. Very clearly, when they pressed, they started to generate some turnovers. They did a good job getting some defensive stops when they needed to in the half court. Hurley has said that's kind of what they have to hang their hat on right now, because they're not as far along offensively, and we saw quite obviously that's the case. Tarleton's an undersized team. It surprised me that the way that the game played out, but they were able to sort of convert on some opportunities generated by their defense late when it mattered.
And Bobby Hurley has said before that Frankie Collins is one of the purest point guards he has ever had, but tonight Frankie had 24 shots and then only 4 assists, so that's not really the purest point guard in my eyes. What were your thoughts on that and their offense as a whole?
So look, Hurley said we don't ever want him shooting 24 times, but he also said the way that Tarleton sagged off, Hurley said he might have taken 40 shots back in his playing days in a game like this. So it was the case that they were going under all those screens and basically daring him to shoot from the beginning. He passed up, I think, his first wide open three-point attempt, but then from there, he probably was told by the coaches, okay, you're going to have to shoot those. And then throughout the night, that's what happened. And look, at the end of the day, he's going to have to show the ability to make those, or else that's the recipe that everybody else is going to use to play ASU this season. But ASU didn't make a three-pointer until well deep into the game, didn't have an assist until well deep, like 13 minutes into the first half. Those things don't work. And even when they did get those assists, it was perimeter passing that led to the three-point shots. They need to find ways to get the ball on the interior, especially to Warren Washington, a 7-footer. He's a pretty good player, passing the ball out of the post from Nevada. They have said they kind of want him to be able to service that type of a role. It just wasn't available. Even if it comes via dribble penetration breakdown, kickouts, and then some rotations to get you some open threes, that's a much better way than they generated a lot of their shots tonight.
And another thing Bobby Hurley noted was that their defense is coming along way faster than their offense. And I think their defense really picked it up, especially in the end, and really won them that game. So what did you see defensively from the team?
That really should be the case normally. It takes a while for teams to get a lot of the more finer aspects of what they're doing offensively, building off of an understanding of where they like to get the ball and how they can kind of move on the court with each other. So I kind of expected that would be the case, but they're not nearly good enough right now offensively to be able to beat better teams based on what we saw from one night, unless this was somewhat anomalous. I do think that their rebounding can be really good. Between Marcus Bagley, Devin Cambridge, their bigs, their guards rebounded really well tonight. DJ Horn shot the ball poorly. He didn't really show a lot of the things that were so good about his game last year, but then he had 10 rebounds and he hit the glass hard. So gang rebounding, really important for this team. That's a huge component of probably what enabled them to win tonight.
And Chris, in your eyes, what were your biggest surprises tonight?
Devon Cambridge starting for sure. He had 3 blocks, showed that he can be a presence in the paint, contesting. But he was 1 of 7, I think, from the field. Not much of an offensive threat. ASU shot the ball really poorly from the free throw line, just 50%. So that was a major thing that you got to work on. And then huge surprise, I would say, was Enoch Boache being like last on the bench among their post players. The fact that they went with Duke Brennan so many minutes from the early off the bench in replacing Washington. And then later in the game, they went with John Olmstead, who's basically a walk-on in key stages in the second half for several minutes over Boache. So that's not a positive development for one of ASU's better athletes and higher upside players in terms of where he's at with his readiness going into the season.
And even though this game was much tighter than I know that Coach Bobby Hurley wanted it to be, ASU did get the win. They are now 1-0 on the season, but they have a tough competitor in NAU on Thursday, so it'll definitely be interesting to see what happens in that game. But for now, this is all the time we have in this edition of the Devil Source Postgame Show. I'm Sammy Miller, that's Chris Cartman, but don't you worry, there's a lot more content coming soon.